right. Well, here we are to our second episode talking about armored combat at Fact TV in Bellows Falls. So first, let's just go over who we are again. I'm Sean Roberon, and I live in Charlestown, and I'm the special event coordinator for the Bellows Falls Opera House, but I'm also involved in armored combat over in Brattleboro with Vermont Armored Combat, VAC. And it's a great group, and I'm mostly in it as a hobby, but have slowly been finding myself getting more potentially involved in competitions that are going to be national, international, that type of stuff, and finding an interest in that. So, yeah.
Awesome. And I'm Colby Thompson. I'm one of the members of Vermont Armored Combat down in Brattleboro, and I was kind of a early member of that founding club with Will Alloway, who is the founder of the club. So I've been kind of in this world of armored combat sports and Buhurt for about it's been just about 2 years, actually, from when I first started training.
Yeah, and you actually potentially have a thing that you're going to this week, hopefully, based on the weather.
Yeah, hopefully.
And what is that going to be?
Yeah, so there's, within the sport, like with a lot of other sports, there are different leagues that people compete at, different levels of competition, your little local fights, and then there's national fights, and then international fights, and competitions. So right now, in the U.S., we had our national, U.S.-based fighters only kind of finalists, like the tournament, to determine who's going to be representing the U.S. as the best fighters of this year to go fight in the international competition. So that's where we'll have Spain's top fighters, Germany, folks from South America and from Australia, all over the world, the globe, really. And so that's happening in Mexico this May. So the top duelists, some of them decided to run this training camp. So I signed up to go and help them train for a long weekend. Now there's a nor'easter coming this weekend, so I don't know how my flight's going to do, but hopefully I'll be able to go there. And even though I'm not on the level of these people, it'll be great exposure for me to get to, see what it's like to fight with a, gold and silver medalist for the type of, dueling I like to do.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And today, one of the topics that we wanted to go over was the types of fights that exist inside of armored combat. Really the three main categories being duels, pro/night fights, and then melees. And we want to go over what those include when we're talking about a duel. What's a duel most of the time, and what are the types of weapons that you fight with in a duel?
Right. Yeah. So a duel is 1v1, so it's just you versus one other person, and generally you've got a minute-long round. I mean, sometimes there's some variation to these rules, but generally it's a 2 to 3 round match, and you generally are matching your weapon types. So that's 2 long swords or 2 pole arms or axes, basically.
So most of the time in a duel, you won't see someone with a big axe versus someone with an arming sword and a shield.
Right. For all the main competitive, if you're trying to compete for points, doing some, not just playing around with your friends kind of thing, they'll always match the weapons for duels. So that's kind of the bread and butter for a lot of fighters, especially if you're in an area where you only have 5 or 6 people who are training and only 2 of them have their kit together. You're kind of limited to only doing the 1v1 fights. So that's where a lot of people, I think, kind of get into the sport.
Yeah, and I think we talked a little bit about this last week, but going into what types of weapons you're not going to be seeing in fights. Like duels can kind of comprise of really any paired weapons, but you're not going to see things like a hammer involved, or something that has a pickaxe type end to it, like a sharp pointy thing that you swing at something, because there's no thrusting inside of armored combat, so you're not going to see weapons that would have that, like a halberd. A halberd that usually has an axe end on one point, a nice sharp pokey end on another, and either a hook or a hammer on the other end. A weapon like that isn't going to be used inside of armored combat because 2 out of 3 of those sides are all capable of doing a piercing, thrusting type of effect into someone.
Exactly, yeah. So even though, and that's generally the rule for this whole world of Buhurt or armored combat sports. It's just, it's all, to be hurt but not broken is the motto. So, you'll feel the sting of when you get hit with certain types of weapons, and there are some potential for injury, especially with some of the bigger weapons out there. But, by and large, your armor and your body should be able to withstand a full strike from someone with pretty much all the weapons that you're going to find out in the field. So nothing should be like, that's going to kill me.
And duels are always about points.
Duels are always about
strikes.
point. Yeah, exactly. So a good solid strike on the edge of the weapon. I brought one of my swords here. Maybe I should show a little bit about that. So, for example, here's a dueling sword. This is an arming sword, one-handed. Typically, you would pair this up with a shield in the other hand. So I brought a buckler here. So it's a kind of smaller shield. And, landing a blow with the edge side of the weapon, on certain parts of the body is a point. So most rule sets mean, your hand strikes don't count. Not supposed to hit the groin or the back of the knees. I think the back of the neck is also don't hit their spot. But everywhere else, this is fair game.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then when we get into pro fights and night fights, what can we expect there? What's the difference between a duel and a night fight?
Yeah, so I think when we're talking about this, we've got those three types of fights: duels, pro fights, and melees. And it's kind of like, I'd say the level of danger goes up a little bit with each one, the level of intensity, level of pain and injury. Because you're starting at one end where it's about speed, essentially with the duels, getting those most points. Pro fights now, it's a 1v1 match, but this is a lot more like a modern martial art where it's who's the winner of the fight by domination of the ring that they're fighting in.
It's much more subjective.
Much more subjective. I think or people are still tracking amount of blows, so if you're hitting the other person a lot more, that's going to, be in your favor. But now when you're doing pro fights, it's there's grappling involved. So there's throwing, a punch, a kick. Those are all seen as like valid ways to, hit your opponent.
Advance yourself inside of the fight.
Exactly. Yeah. And so for that we have same thing. You might use a shield like this for a pro fight, and instead of just blocking like I might do in a duel, now it's all about like you can really slam this thing home into someone's helmet and kind of, push him back a little bit, get him a little disoriented, and use this now as essentially a second weapon. And you might use a sword more like this, which is a falchion, which, is wider. The idea is that this is like a heavier blow. They're going to feel this a lot more than they would feel this sword, which is more about speed. So yeah, that's the next type of 1v1 fight. So that's our duel was the first thing, and then pro fights.
And
was the
then
second.
there's just a slight difference between then when we're talking about pro fights versus night fights. You'll hear those terms used interchangeably by us sometimes. But when we're referring to a night fight, that was kind of made up by the ACS, the Armored Combat Sports Group, from the Knights Hall. And the reason why the Knights Hall created night fights instead of pro fights is because they weren't a huge fan of the ground fighting. In a lot of pro fights, if somebody gets knocked on the ground, they're allowed to continue being attacked by the person who's still standing up. The fight is continuing. But the Knights Hall wasn't really a huge fan of that, and so they created night fights with the idea that if somebody gets knocked down, you take a step back from each other, the other person gets to get back up, the person who knocked them down gets a point, and then you continue the fight. And the reason why they did that was for two reasons, they say. One is if somebody's been knocked down, they've probably lost. The other person who's still standing is going to keep wailing on them, and they won that round, basically. Like the person who got knocked down probably isn't going to get back up, probably, most of the time. And so there's no real need other than humiliation to continue the fight beyond getting knocked down. But that's one reason. The other reason is also some serious injuries can occur when somebody is on the ground. People will kind of drop on top of the person who's still on the ground with both knees on the chest. And when you're, let's say, 200 pounds and you're wearing another 60 pounds on top of that, and you drop down on someone's chest with both of your knees, that could kill someone.
Yeah.
And so that's just another reason why they did it, because they didn't really like the idea that we're having to continue the fight and potentially lead to someone's death. With the types of strikes that sometimes happen to people when they're on the ground.
And I'm sure there are some folks out there who participate in the pro fights. That is a much more, easy to digest filmed event that if you have never seen any of this before, you go and they have now pro fights that are happening down in, I believe it's Asheville, and they do armored MMA, essentially, is what they've kind of branded themselves as. And so that's the same thing. They've got that like octagon ring, just like you might see with mixed martial arts now, kind of like a pay-per-view event. The fighter comes out, there's the fireworks, there's the music, they walk down, and then the other guy comes in too, fighters, to the corners, and then they just go at it for their rounds. It's a lot more simple to be like, that guy's winning, because look at him get tossed around the ring. And I think there are some fighters who do pro fights who are like, no, the ground fighting is where it's at. Like, they love getting into that, but it is definitely where there's a lot of risk. And if you're not, there's a high... With a lot of this, there's an amount of time you put in to get something back. Your effort you're putting in will translate to how quick you can move, how long you can be in your kit, still be breathing and feeling okay. But that level of just kind of being able to muddy your way through it when you're doing a pro fight and you've just been tossed to the floor, like that's the standard of being able to be competitive with that goes like through the roof, I think. There are some people who can get up from a throw or being grabbed when they're down on the ground. But I think those people are really pushing themselves, and they put a lot of time into that.
Oh, yeah. And both are legitimate. Like, neither of the styles that we're talking about when it comes to pro fight versus night fight, neither are bad. It's just differences in what people are looking for inside of a fight.
Yeah.
And so then we get into melees.
This is the main event. This is really what Buhurt is for a lot of the world. You want to take this one?
Sure. So that's kind of the thing that got me interested in armored combat. I was really excited about the fighting and being able to duel with people and stuff like that. But the videos that I watched were all about melees. Were all about these 3 versus 3, 5v5, 10 versus 10, 16 versus 16, 32 versus 32. Like, the numbers can get really huge at some events. But just these group fights where one group of fighters go up against another group of fighters inside of what's called a list, just a large rectangular prison. It's just a grid that they're inside of. And inside of a melee, if you get basically a third part of your body touches the ground other than your feet, you're out. So it's not about the points like in duels. It's not about who looked like the better fighter during the fight, like in a pro fight. It really comes to more of like a wrestling and football type of vibe where it's just about crashing into somebody else and making them fall down or hitting them hard enough that they kneel because they're just giving up, because they're in a vulnerable enough state that they're like, if I continue doing this, I'm gonna have a broken arm. I'm kneeling. I'm in a pinned, vulnerable place. I can't do anything about it. I'm out. So melees are very exciting in that sense. A lot of fun for our audience to watch.
Yeah, it's last man standing essentially determines the team that wins.
Right.
So there's a lot of strategy involved when you are looking at the numbers of what a 3v3 looks like versus a 5v5.
Right. The different type of weapons you bring in.
And the pros and cons of each one.
Yeah.
It's there are people who really geek out about this part.
Yeah.
And this is their main focus in this whole night world of fighting and the modern sport that we have. This is what brings a lot of people to it.
Something that I don't think we talked about for pro fights, do you always have to bring in the same matching weapons?
And I believe you do not need to do that.
And that's the same with melees. Everybody's bringing in whatever weapons they want to, but most of the time people will bring in a falchion over an arming sword in a melee. You're never going to really see an arming sword in a melee.
No, for sure.
Because it's not going to deliver pain. Yeah. And that is actually a thought process in melees, is what weapon can I bring in that when I knock someone in the side of their leg, when they're wrapped up with someone else, is going to make them fall over.
Yeah.
Like melees can be violent in that sense. Like, they're more aggressive. And so people are wearing more protection during a melee. They're more concerned with the right type of armor that they're wearing to make sure that if a strike goes somewhere, I know I'll have metal somewhere in that area that's going to stop me from taking a full swing from a big pole arm with a piece of metal on the end of it. And but melees are a lot of fun, and I'm looking to get more involved with them and get ourselves forming a team with VAC to actually be able to get involved in some melees, like in June. The very end of June, at Fort at number 4 in Charlestown, there's an event that the Reavers from Maine, that's one of the teams in Maine, are going to be at, and we're going to be going there and participating in the melee fights that they're doing, and helping them by basically being mercenaries for the 2 different teams that are going to be there. So that I'm very excited to get involved with those types of events. And the Knights Hall has a melee team, a very, very well-known, great melee team, the Executioners.
Yeah, and the Banshees too.
The Banshees too.
They've medaled,
yes.
I think, almost every year that they've fielded, and that's the women's team.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
And they both just brought home bronze, right?
I think
At a national competition. Is that
at
what
Carnage,
it was?
yeah.
At
Carolina
Carnage?
Carnage, yeah.
Yeah. They both teams brought home bronze. Like, they're a really good team. And great people. I love hanging out with those
Very
people
true.
down at the Knights Hall. And so, yeah, melees, very exciting, much more dangerous than when we talk about duels. And last man standing, like you said, you're just trying to knock over the other team, and there's a lot of strategy involved into who's bringing what weapons in and what's the goal, and who's trying to wrap up who against the list, the rectangular area, and who's trying to like wiggle around and knock someone over when they're not looking, all of those types of things. So melees. And do you have anything else that you would add about melees?
No, I think
now?
you pretty much covered that. That's the team sport.
Yeah.
So we have at VAC where just about, I think I counted the amount of members we have going into the summer, because we've got a couple people who are putting their kits together right now. We're going to be at 6 or 7 fully armored members, hopefully by the end of this summer.
That would be awesome for us to be able to say that we can field a 5v5 game, like
So-
against someone else.
So I think we will, because one of those is Will. Will doesn't want to do it, and that's
Yep.
fine. I'm still on the fence,
Yes,
but
you are.
I'll do some for fun ones. For fun. But yeah, that's going to be cool, and we have that amount of people that we can do this routinely on Sundays, get together and mess around.
Totally. How do you train? Like for you personally, when it comes to armored combat, what do you find to be the most effective things when it comes to this particular sport?
Yeah, so I do want to start with like one of the first things that I think might be relatable to a lot of people who might be interested in this. If obviously, if this is what a sport looks like for me as something that I'm interested in, maybe soccer didn't quite cut it when I was a kid. Maybe you're picking up that vibe a little bit. And I participated in some of those sports, but nothing really stuck with me for just going on into adulthood. So, I was kind of just like, kind of a scrawny guy. I would kind of, build my body up for whatever activity I was going to do. Did some like long distance through hiking, did the long trail with my partner a couple summers ago. I built my tiny house, which I did that myself, which was extremely grueling to do. But I've never been like a weightlifter. I've never wanted to go to the gym. I'm like, if my body needs to do something, it'll just condition itself to do that thing while I'm doing it. So this is the only time in my life that I've actually had the motivation to continue a workout program because the payoff is so, to me, so exciting. It's not like I'm just trying to build muscle to look like I have muscle, which, again, was never something that would motivate me long term. But to be like, I'm doing these certain workouts, which means that my arms won't be burning, 30 seconds into a fight. Maybe they'll be burning at 35 seconds, but I've gained those 5 extra seconds by working super hard, And same thing with all the other realms. So Will had me starting off on doing Tabata workouts, which is kind of a timed thing where, you're going for, 12 minutes or whatever. You do 20 or 30-second workout, just trying to get as many reps as you can in, take a break for 5 or 10 seconds or something, and then you go into like another type of workout, push-ups, crunches, whatever it is that you're doing. And you kind of, you go through a couple sets of that, for the full 12 minutes. The idea is you're just like, like high-intensity workouts where you're kind of banging them out. Nowadays, I'll spend maybe 3 days a week. I'll try and go to the gym. And that's where I'll have like traditional leg days, squats and whatever, using weights to do lunges and things. And then kind of finish it out with some time on a treadmill or a bike or whatever and get a couple miles in. And then also mixing that in with like an arm day where it's a bunch of different types of lifting thing. And seeing where I started, which was, again, 2 years ago, I was at the 15, 20 pounds weight rack for lifting stuff. And now I'm up at 45 and 50 pounds for a lot of things. It's just like, I never thought I'd be able to do that. It's really cool. All because I'm a sword nerd. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, how about you?
For me, I'm much more of a hobbyist than you at this point when it comes to like taking it much more seriously on the workout level. But for me, the main thing that I have found is the Pell.
Oh, yeah.
Just a post in the ground that you can move around in a kind of a circle around and practice doing basically a duel. I like doing 60 seconds on, 30 seconds off, or 90 seconds on, 30 seconds off, and doing that 3 times to represent a fight that I would be in. And I try to go as fast and as hard as I can for those 60 seconds each round. And then once I'm done with one fight, I give myself like a 60-second break or something. And then I start all over again to represent 3 fights in a row, as if I didn't have a break between any of these real fights that are happening. And I find that is the most important thing for me, because I feel like I'm in a place where I don't have to worry as much about getting shoved around too much. I don't have to worry too much about being slow. It's mostly about a gas tank thing, like making sure that I can continue fighting where my arms don't become jello partway through a fight.
Yep.
And just working on that Pell routine and keeping myself moving around it, striking at it, really helps build up that endurance. So then that way, when the other person is getting tired by the middle of their second round, you're still ready to go. And I've still got 2 more fights worth of stamina in me in this one fight that I'm about to go into. And so that's kind of the main thing that I do as for me.
Well, that's
training.
And like anything, by just doing the thing is a great way to prepare to do the thing.
Right.
So,
right.
yeah, spending time out there, just whacking a wooden pole with a sword or an axe or something, there's nothing's going to train your body for it like actually doing that.
Right.
I have slacked on my Pell work over the years. I used to be a lot better about going out there and doing form work, especially when I would get ready for I'd have a match coming up or something. I'd really try and do that every other day or something. I'd say that would be the best thing, was if you could have a 3-day workout schedule, maybe minimum do 3 days of just gym time, and then getting some Pell time in, or just some actual sword practice, 3-4 times a week if you can, would be like, that would be a really solid workout routine.
And I felt a drastic difference. We talked about this, that there was a Valentine's Day event that the Knights Hall hosted, and then there was a St. Patrick's Day event that the Knights Hall hosted. I went to the Valentine's Day event, and I had been doing lots of Pell work.
I remember that.
Building up to that. And I just felt like I could keep going. I had the energy. I could keep my fights exciting and everything. And then didn't do much Pell work at all between Valentine's Day event and the St. Patty's Day event. And St. Patty's Day event, I was exhausted going into that. And so there's a huge difference for me that I feel if I keep up that Pell work. And so that's... I will bet my life on Pell work now because of what I felt, and such a huge difference between those 2 events.
For sure. Sure.
And before we stop today, I think we're getting close to running out of time. But can you tell me what your first fight was ever like? Wearing armor, first fight.
Yeah. So this was in Brattleboro, 2022, I think. Maybe it was 2023. It's a while ago now. Were we trained together last summer?
Yes, but I think your first fight was before I was involved.
Okay, yeah. So it was 2 years ago then, and I was able to borrow this guy's kit. It was about my size, Liam, and his original kit, he's since upgraded, but this is the one that he would let people borrow. And the brig, the metal coat of plates that you wear on your chest, is called Grandma's Couch in the community, because it just has like the swirly kind of couch 70s pattern on it. So it was really heavy. I think that kit weighed 80-something pounds, 85 pounds, with a helmet that was a little too tight. I was afraid that I'd have to get the jaws of life to open it up, it would be stuck in there. I mean, it was sloppy. It was, we did it just in Brattleboro, downtown. It was like outside of a food truck. We managed to get a couple other fighters to come out. It was a Polish food truck, so it was kind of like a Ukraine, raise money event. And Yeah, Will cleaned my clock per usual. And I'm sure Will was going easy on me with it being like my first time. But I did get to go against this other guy after for my second fight. I did 3 fights that day, and for one of them, I actually managed to either win a round or win 2 rounds in that 3-round matchup. I can't remember if I won the fight or a round in the fight, but either way, like at that point, if just seeing like, and this round goes to Colby, I'm like, no way, wow, that was such a rush. Yeah, I didn't really know what I was doing at that point, and I was surprised at how exhausted I was. I kind of felt like I was going to throw up, both the nerves before the fight and because I couldn't breathe during the fight. But I was totally hooked after that, completely hooked. Yeah, how about you?
My first fight was at the Knights Hall last year, and very exciting. It was kind of an amalgamation of a couple people's kits. And they didn't all fit properly. I had a very similar, helmet didn't fit correctly.
I remember that. Yeah, that was bad.
It consistently throughout the entire fight kept, wiggling up. And so my eyesight just kept, having to look at you like this in order to see you through the helmet. And the entire fight having to just keep grabbing my face with my gauntlet and just ripping my helmet down tight on my head. And I had a big, scratch on the top of my head by the end of the fight from just having to keep pulling the helmet down on my head. And but it was a blast. Getting to get all that armor on and being able to do longsword, and people were like, that was pretty good for your first time. And it was a lot of fun, but I was beat that day. I was so tired that night. Yeah. I got 2 fights in that night and I was done. I couldn't do a third. But it was a motivation. I think some people, maybe they might be like, oh, that was terrible, I don't want to do that again. But for me, it was, I lost. And to me, I lost because I couldn't get that third fight in. That was so exhausting. I was beat. I'm gonna win. I'm gonna keep this going and I'm gonna beat this. And so it was a motivation to me, and I was excited to keep trying and keep going to the Knights Hall and to get more fights in. I want to get to a point where I walk away at the end of the night and I'm just like, I'm fine. I still got it. I'm still ready to go. Put me through a Shark Tank, a experience of just fighting person after person. I want to live through those types of experiences and know that, well, I came from just showing up and getting thrown into 2 little fights and feeling exhausted too. I can keep doing this. Yeah. And so it was a lot of fun.
And ultimately, one of the things that I heard from another fighter who trains out in Colorado, and she does, gold medalist out there. She mentioned that, with this, the actual sport itself, so exhausting, the training for it, also tiring, even just striking that Pell. But, where else can you be doing something that's a practice, that's a workout, that is so fun,
Right.
that is
Right.
The actual thing is such an adrenaline rush, such a dump of fear and nerves and excitement. It's just such a rush that I think a lot of people first time, I'd love to get people to try some a full kit fight early on into their career once they're sticking around for a couple weeks or a month or 2. Just so they can get that taste of this is what I'm working towards.
Right. This is the goal.
This is the goal because I know how that feels, and I just want to do that as much as I can. Yeah, that's cool. They made me smile thinking of our first times.
Yep.
Yeah.
The only other thing that I want to mention before we end today is June 1st again, which is the Battle with Bands. It's happening in Bellows Falls. It's an event that's going to have Ezra Veach and I hosting it. He will be putting together the musical component. We'll be having a concert with live music happening down on Mill Street at the park down there. And myself hosting the armored combat component, where we'll be having up to 20 fighters at the event taking part in duels, some pro fights, and some melees, just a few melees, but they'll be in there. And being able to meet and greet with the fighters and be able to see what this sport is all about. And our list will be made of a hay bale, which will be fun. We had that same thing at Retreat Farm last year at the Cheese Cup event that VAC hosted. And some people found it very fun. Others didn't, who were more traditional. They like their lists. Lists are great. But the hay bale is fun because you get to see people go just their legs go flying into the air when they get knocked over the hay bales, and makes the melees faster, and you keep getting more fights in because of that.
Yeah.
So I think the hay bales are pretty fun. So that event happening June 1st from noon until 5. And if you're interested in getting tickets for it, which would be great because that supports the Opera House, because that's who we're running our tickets through. So any ticket you buy for this event, part of those ticket sales are going to be going towards the Opera House. So you're supporting the community, supporting our Opera House through this show, and helping inspire us to do more different types of events in the town, but using the Opera House as kind of our host site for the ticketing venue. So, yeah.
Great.
Do you have anything else you'd like to add before we end?
No, I think this is a good chat today. I'm glad we got into the weeds with some of the different types of fights. And yeah, if anyone, per usual, if anyone is interested, this is sparking a fire in you. Come and see it live. June 1st, we'll be in the community at Bellows Falls.
Or reach out to me at worldunderwonder@gmail.com if you'd like to talk to me about the event that's happening on June 1st. Or if you'd like to get involved with VAC in Brattleboro.
Yeah.
We're always looking for more people.
Yep.
We want everybody, it's a very inclusive group. We're looking to keep expanding and get ourselves a larger team of people.
Send us a message on Facebook. We've got the Vermont Armored Combat Facebook page, and Sean will be replying to you promptly if you message through there.
Yeah.
This is a, all body types, all types of people is what we want here. It's a very accepting and supportive community.
Yes, and that's what we're looking for. So thank you very much for listening today. See you next week.